Today's episode of Parenting Great Kids is made possible by Be Frugal. Next time you're shopping online, you have to try Be Frugal. Be Frugal lets you earn up to 40% cash back on your purchase from over 5,000 stores, including Amazon, Walmart, Target, Macy's, and more. Simply shop online as you normally would, then click the link on BeFrugal.com and cash back is sent to you via check, PayPal, or Amazon gift card. You can even stack your coupons and cash back to get the best possible deal. Best of all, everything about using Be Frugal and earning cash back is 100% free. You'll even get a $10 welcome bonus upon joining. So visit BeFrugal.com/Meg and get a $10 bonus when you join for free. And by Julian KRINKSY Camps and Programs. Julian KRINKSY Camps and Programs is not your ordinary summer camp. With over 20 programs for ages 7 to 18 and students from 40 different countries, your child will have a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Students enjoy programs in business, cooking, pre-college academics, the arts, tennis, golf, and more, all on college campuses in the Philadelphia area. Get 10% off with promo code JKCP2017 at jkcp.com/Meg. For 30 plus years, I've seen every type of child grow up.
Instead of giving me what I wanted, she gave me what I needed, which was truth.
Don't let emotions win. Let truth win.
Do your very best, and you should have a lot of fun while you do it. And the better you get at something, the more fun you're going to have at something.
You moms and dads are wired with everything you need to be a parent to a great kid. Welcome to Parenting Great Kids. This is episode number 30, Helping Your Spouse Be a Better Parent. I'm your host, Dr. Meg Meeker. Today I'll be talking with a friend of mine and a lady with a lot of wisdom, Dr. Linda Mintle, author of We Need to Talk, about how to help your spouse be a better parent. Did you know that you can actually do that? You, mom or dad, can help your spouse be a better parent to your kids. I know I say this a lot, but this is such an important topic. We don't work together enough as a team, moms and dads. We tend to work against each other or dominate or do things better than one another, and we need to come alongside and support each other because parenting is a team sport, and it's so easy to forget how much we need each other. Also in this episode, I'll be featuring a listener question from a mom who's considering homeschooling. As always, I'll share my points to ponder for you to start using right away. And parents, as a reminder, don't just download episodes, click subscribe. When you do that, you're joining my parenting revolution, and every new episode will automatically show up in your subscribed list. You won't regret it. And we'd love for you to write us a review on iTunes and let us know what you think. Also, not only are we on iTunes, but the Parenting Great Kids podcast is available in the Google Play Store and on Stitcher. So no matter where you get your podcasts, subscribe today and don't miss a single episode. So parents, thanks for listening. This is episode number 29. Stay with us. Now we'll go into my points to ponder. First, embrace the different communication styles of your partner. This is very hard, but the truth of the matter is men and women communicate not only to one another very differently, we communicate differently to our kids. Did you know, for instance, that fathers tend to bond with their children by playing? Mothers, on the other hand, tend to bond with their children by talking. So it's very important that we recognize the different ways that fathers communicate to children versus the way we mothers communicate to children. And when we do that, we alleviate a lot of stress in the parenting and in the marriage. Many mothers feel that fathers, for instance, are insensitive. I remember feeling like my husband was really insensitive because he didn't talk much. He listened. He didn't always respond to things that the kids said. And I realized that he wasn't insensitive. He was simply listening more attentively than I was. So I was misjudging him. He wasn't insensitive. He was just listening. It's important for us to learn to recognize that both parents want to be good parents. parents. But we go about parenting and communicating in very different ways, but our intentions and our hearts are aligned. We need to always give our spouse the benefit of the doubt. Like, I thought my husband was insensitive because I thought he wasn't listening. The truth of the matter is, his heart was aligned with my heart. He was trying to be a very good dad, but he was doing it in a very different way than I would as a mother. Second, allow your partner room to parent well. This is a tough one, particularly for us mothers who feel like we want to dominate the parenting scene. And many times this sense of controlling and dominating parenting starts early in life. For instance, think about us as we breastfeed our children. Many times fathers are cut out of the feeding experience with children because we breastfeed all the time. Now, this is wonderful. Of course, I want to encourage young mothers to breastfeed their children, but I also want to encourage mothers to allow their husbands to feed their babies breast milk or a bit of formula periodically in a bottle so that dad can bond with the kids too. It's important that neither mother or father dominates all the conversations, all the discipline, or all the fun times with kids. Many times one parent becomes the disciplinarian and the other parent becomes the fun parent. This is natural because of differences in personalities, but make sure that you as a parent aren't dominating one area of the parenting and pushing your spouse out of the way. The truth is, there are some things that your partner does better than you do. So let him or her do it. We mothers tend to be controlling, and we don't want to surrender our opinion or our feelings when it comes to raising our kids. But we must be willing to allow fathers to engage our children and not get in their way. This is particularly hard if we have all girls. Third, be intentional about praising the other parent. So many times we focus on praising our kids and building up our children's self-esteem and telling them what they're doing right and not criticizing them, that we forget to praise the other parent. Well, you know what, moms and dads? Mothers need encouragement and praise, and so do fathers. The truth is, most of us go to bed at the end of the day feeling like we could have done things a lot better, or perhaps we missed the mark. But we need to be partners and support each other and encourage each other. Mothers often feel undervalued and underappreciated, and fathers often feel inadequate and sometimes clueless when it comes to what to do with the children. So, give praise to your partner liberally. This not only helps that parent be a better parent, but you'll be amazed how it improves your relationship with your spouse. Friends, it's finally here. My new book, Hero, Being the Strong Father Your Children Need, is now available for purchase. You've heard me talking about it for a while, and I'm so happy to tell you that you can get your copy now at HeroDadBook.com. Dads, whether you know it or not, you are the center of your child's life, and that's exactly what this book is all about. Moms, this is a great book for your husbands, and husbands, this is a great book for you. Hero is a book for all dads, whether they're married, divorced, widowed, or stepdads. All that matters is understanding that your children need and want you. And if you want what is best for you and your children, then you need this book. When you visit HeroDadBook.com, you'll also find a variety of Hero gift bundles, some with a coffee mug, a journal, and even a Hero t-shirt. We created these special gifts to serve as reminders for you, Dad, to choose to be the hero in your child's life every day. And they also make great Father's Day gifts or birthday gifts. Visit HeroDadBook.com to learn more and order your copy today. I want you now to listen in on a conversation I had with Dr. Linda Mintle about helping your spouse be a better parent. I know you're going to enjoy it. My guest right now is Dr. Linda Mintle. Linda, you wrote a book called We Need to Talk. Do men and women have communication problems?
Well, we actually communicate differently, so that's what can set up the problems. And part of that is, and you will understand this, Dr. Meeker, that we have brains that are wired a little bit differently. Male brains have more connections within the hemispheres of the brain, and women have more connections between the hemispheres of the brain. And so what that means is that women are more suited to multitasking and to analytical thought. And so we express ourselves using emotional states. We're more socialized towards emotions. It's from a very early age. And so for parenting, what happens is we are able to give a lot of directions and commands at one time. We can do several things at one time. We're tuning into the emotional lives of our children. Now, men, because their brains are different, are better at linear tasks. This is often why a lot of times you might say to your husband, I've had this happen so many times, he'll look at me and he'll say, okay, can you just give me one thing at a time or put it on a list?
Yeah, exactly. You know, our communication styles cause problems in parenting. And I saw this, you know, my husband and I have been married 36 years. We raised 4 kids, and I was convinced for probably 15 or 20 years that he just didn't understand how to relate to girls. But what I realized is he was communicating very differently, and there's conflict in there too. So what do wives need to know about how their husbands communicate to kids and vice versa?
So for one thing, women use a lot of words, and it has, again, to do with the way our brains are wired differently. So we talk things out. We want to have conversations. We want to get right to it. And one of the things that we do a lot with kids is we are able to kind of process very quickly sort of what's going on with the emotional stuff that's going on with the child. Now, men feel things very deeply. They just don't always use words to express it. So one of the really easy things people can relate to is often with a dad, he'll get conversation going in the car, sitting side by side, or playing a sport, or going fishing, or doing something else. That's when the conversation actually happens. So the way that they approach the child, a lot of times through play, through sports, through doing something, is very different from how we like to sit down and just directly address and talk. And so I think if you understand the style differences and you allow the other person to communicate differently and then come together on that communication, it really helps.
You know, it's so important to understand that, because as I think back over rearing our children, I was convinced for years my husband just wasn't very sensitive to the girls. Yeah. You know, and I thought, but you are a sensitive person. I know somewhere inside there you're feeling deeply, but why don't we hear about those feelings, and why don't you express your concern to the girls? And I remember saying to the girls, you know, Dad loves you very deeply. It's just sometimes it comes out really sideways. And I remember saying that to a lot of my girl patients who are really struggling with feeling that their fathers don't love them. And I say, but he does. It's just you've got to understand he communicates it differently. So mothers need to understand that dads aren't just cold people towards their kids. They just relate differently to them. But you're saying they relate differently, but they still feel towards those kids.
Yes, they feel very deeply. And I think it helps parents if we sit and think about the differences just in our own children, if we have a different gendered child. So your son comes home from school, you look at him, you kind of talk, you say, hey, how was school? Great, fine. Then your daughter comes home. At least I had this experience. How was school? And she goes on for about 15 minutes telling you every detail of the day. That right there helps a parent understand, wow, men and women communicate differently. And so part of the work then is to draw it out. So part of the issue for husbands then is to say to them, hey, look, just, you know, they want to talk. Your daughters want to talk a little bit more, or even your sons want to talk a little bit more. And one of the things that, you know, Meg, it's so important when your kids get to be teenagers is that they have to be at the time that they want to talk. Right. So a lot of times what would happen is we would be very tired. We'd be getting ready for bed, maybe at 11 o'clock at night. And our teenage kids, both boys and girls, would come in about that hour, sit in the bedroom, just kind of look at us. And we kind of knew, okay, we're going to have an hour and a half conversation here because they're ready to talk. Right. So it's not just the kids. I mean, it's not just the parents who communicate differently in terms of the difference in their brains. The kids are also having those experiences and I have to figure out how to deal with their parents. So it's kind of a two-way street.
You think of all the communication going on and the different personalities and the different ages and the different sexes. No wonder there can end up being a lot of conflict because you get a lot of wires crossed and a lot of misunderstanding. And so mothers can misunderstand fathers' intentions, fathers to the wives, and then, you know, each parent to the kids. What can mothers do to help foster, nurture better relationships between the father and the children and vice versa?
I think one of the things that's really important is moms can always be respectful and not criticize their husbands in front of their kids. You know, if you disagree with what's going on between the parenting with the child and the father, let's say, it's always good to just kind of let it run and then afterwards come back and say, okay, let's just talk about what happened, and not do this in a way that's critical or nagging, because a lot of guys feel like, oh, I'm just going to get critiqued after I do something. So helping them understand that, you know, I just have a different point of view, or I saw this differently, or I want to help you so you can connect better with our kids, and then have that conversation. But respect is really important. It's not only important for children to see respect between their parents, but it's also important for the parents to be able to do that with their kids. So I think that's one of the things. I think another thing is that moms can really help by helping the guys understand, look, I get this emotional stuff much quicker usually when I'm watching things, and I can kind of assess the emotional climate. And I do that fairly quickly, but you seem to be able to make decisions much more quickly. So why don't we just help each other? Why don't we get in this together? I'll sort of cue you on what's going on emotionally. You can take the lead on some of the decisions and where we're going with this. Again, it's kind of working together and understanding what the strengths of each of the genders is when we get together.
Well, that can work well if you don't have a lot of marital conflict or stress to begin with. But I imagine if you've got some animosity between moms and dads and they're angry with each other over some marital issue, when it comes to parenting, that's a hard thing to do, to sit down and say, okay, let's put all our differences aside. You parent and communicate differently with the kids than I do. So what are your strengths? What are mine? And let's work together with a team. But we need to learn to do that because our children need and deserve a good relationship with each parent. And I think sometimes mothers get very self-focused on our relationship with our kids, and we don't even consider the father's relationship with the children and understanding that we can help that relationship, and we owe it to our children to help that relationship. And the same is true with fathers. You know, fathers to understand that, you know, my child needs a good relationship with the mother, so it really behooves the children to help with the other parent's relationship. Parents, I hope you're enjoying my conversation with Dr. Linda Mintle. We need to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Parents, there's always an excuse for not eating healthy. You don't have a personal nutritionist, or you don't have access to the right ingredients, or you're too tired to plan and shop and cook. Well, your body doesn't understand excuses. That's why SUNBASKET got rid of them. SUNBASKET makes it easy to cook delicious, seasonal, nutritious meals in your own kitchen. You'll get organic, non-GMO ingredients from the best farms and fishermen sent directly to your door. You can choose from paleo, gluten-free, vegetarian, breakfast, and family options created by an award-winning chef and approved by nutritionists. Each SUNBASKET meal comes with pre-measured fresh ingredients and easy-to-follow directions. From start to finish, you'll have dinner on the table in 30 minutes, and it's delicious. Eating right starts now with SUNBASKET. Go to sunbasket.com/Meg today and get your first 3 meals free. That's sunbasket.com/MEG to get 3 healthy, easy-to-prepare meals free. Great spellers come from great readers. That's why Kindle is the proud presenting sponsor of the 2017 Scripps National Spelling Bee. A Kindle e-reader is a great way to encourage a child's emerging love for reading, especially as they begin to read chapter books independently. The lightweight Kindle e-reader is perfect for young readers because they can bring thousands of books with them wherever they go without weighing down their backpack. Plus, a single-purpose Kindle e-reader is designed for reading only, which means no videos, no games, no apps, no distractions. Kindle also supports comprehension and vocabulary development by automatically creating flashcards of words looked up on the device for future review and incorporating simple definitions in the margins above difficult words. And with Kindle Free Time, parents can create personalized profiles for kids and give them access to titles from their own collection of books. Then, parents get sent a progress report to keep them updated on their child's reading habits. Learn more about the ways Kindle inspires a child's love of reading by visiting Amazon.com/Kindle for Kids. And make sure to tune in to next week's Scripps National Spelling Bee, presented by Kindle, Thursday, June 1st at 8 p.m. on ESPN. Mothers and fathers bring something very different in addition to communication to the table with their children. And we're living in a time when many people say, well, you know, it doesn't matter whether you have a mom and a dad, as long as the child is loved and as long as there are adults in the child's life that love him, then life is good. But you and I know, because we've been around kids and parents for so long, that's really not true. So can you articulate some of the different things, aside from communication, that mothers bring to children and that fathers bring to children?
Sure. It is so important to understand this, because I don't, like you, for 1 minute believe that fathers are unnecessary. And that's a very dangerous kind of thinking that we're seeing in our culture. One of the areas for dads, especially, dads are so much more, they're better with risk taking. Mm-hmm. You know, moms tend to be more concerned about safety and protection. I remember when my daughter was on the monkey bars after school, I'd be watching her and I'd be flinching because I was so worried that she was going to fall down. And then I, would see her, my husband just throwing her around, sometimes like a sack of potatoes. And he was really letting her kind of experience a little bit of adventure and risk. And I think that is a really good thing. And that ties into the idea that dads do play harder with kids. Yeah. They're tougher with kids. And sometimes the mom thinks, oh, he's going to be so aggressive because dad is playing so hard with him or her. But actually what happens in that process is that the fathers teach kids better self-control and limits. They teach boys not to bite, not to kick in rough play. They teach girls how to calm themselves and to deal with their emotions. And it's interesting when we look at the research, the children whose aggressive behavior is out of control the most are those without fathers in the home. And these kids are unpopular with peers a lot of times too, because they respond in a truly aggressive manner when they don't have this rumble-tumble play with their dad. So I think that's such an important idea that needs to be, again, talked about in the family. Yeah. I also think that dads are much better letting kids sit with frustration, and that a lot of times moms want to jump in. Our instinct is to kind of fix things and try to, nurture them in that process. I tell you a funny story. I remember I was scheduled with my daughter when she was younger. I think she was like a 12-year-old, I think. She was going to have her ears pierced. And so we were supposed to go to the mall, have her ears pierced, and something happened and I couldn't go, and my husband was going to take her. And so when she got into the chair, she started to kind of freak out about it and go, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know. And my husband just kind of looked at her and he said, did you want to have it done? Yeah. She said, yes, I did. And he goes, all right. He looked at the lady and goes, do it now and do both ears at one time. And he didn't give her any chance to back out of it. And boom, it was done. And she came home. What was so funny was that she told me when she was back home, she said, Mom, had you gone with me to the mall, I know what would have happened. I would have started complaining. You would have started talking to me about how I was feeling. You would have told me we could wait. We'll process it a little bit more. When you're ready, we'll come back. Yeah. And I thought, she's right. Yes. I would have approached that so differently, but I liked what he did because he made her be more confident and face it right there and then and actually do what she needed to do.
You're absolutely right. And as I think about that, fathers, and my husband was with our kids too, they're much more comfortable with a child struggling, and they don't feel they need to rescue the child from any type of emotional discomfort or physical discomfort. And I think kids need that. We need that because struggling is so much a part of success in life. And the bigger the struggles and the more we become resilient and learn to overcome those struggles, the better we become at anything in life. And it seems to me that fathers are more comfortable letting their kids just sit there and stew and wonder and be uncomfortable. Why do we feel that we need to rescue our kids so much? Because I see this all the time in mothers.
Well, I think it has something to do with the level of empathy and the caring caring for that child, and our natural instinct is to protect. I mean, we protect them when they're in the womb. We want to protect them when they're out of the womb. We want to make sure that nothing bad happens to them. So it's just that caring and nurturing part of us that kind of kicks in. But what we're talking about is really important, because what we're describing is something that psychologists call stress inoculation. In the same way that, people come in and they get a vaccine and they get an inoculation so that they don't get a disease later on, like chickenpox or some other disease. We have to do that same thing with stress with kids, and dads seem to have a better sense of that, where they say, yes, if they struggle, I'm giving them just enough stress to deal with it, to see that they can feel bad, and regulate their emotions in that process, get a little bit of stress in there, and then coach them and move them on. And what that does over time is it does build resilience, because it inoculates them then from stress. And we're hearing so much about this in terms of helicopter parenting, and there's now something called lawnmower parenting, where you want to just mow down every obstacle that's in the way of the child. And what we're starting to see with millennials who've had that kind of parenting style is that they just can't cope. Right. And they don't know how to problem solve, and they don't know how to regulate their emotions, and all they do is go by how they feel, rather than being able to think through and problem solve and deal with some critical thinking.
I mean, it really cripples kids. And you look at our whole culture and the focus that we have on making sure we don't hurt anyone's feelings. Even to the point at University of Michigan, they're talking about, it's a violation of a person if you call them a pronoun that they don't feel that they are that day. So if you call a boy a he, but he says he's a she that day, that's a violation against that person. So it really gets out of control, this whole sense that, we need to protect our feelings so much. And what it does is it sets our kids up for disaster, because the truth of the matter is we're not protected, and we don't need to be that protected in life. We are more resilient. It's fine to be criticized, and sometimes you need to be criticized. And yet, on the other hand, we've never seen bullying in our culture worse than ever. I look at what's going on with social media and tween girls. It's horrible what these girls are doing to one another. So it's it's very ironic.
Think about this with social media. What happens on social media is you don't have to face a person, face to face. You don't have to be accountable. You don't have to deal with it when you hear something bad. You can just, it's you're anonymous. You don't have consequences for that. Nobody has to face each other. So what we're losing in this process by having so much of our interactions take place on social media, and then also worrying so much about how they're offended, and allowing children and young adults to move into life with emotional reasoning, which is just when they reason with their emotions, is that they're not learning how to regulate their emotions. And then what do we see as a consequence of that? When they feel bad, they don't know what to do. So then they turn to drugs, they turn to alcohol, they turn to, again, social media as a way of getting a dopamine hit, which is a reward center part of the brain that gets turned on by that. They turn to pornography, they turn to acting out, or maybe they turn inward and they turn to, feeling out of control, so I'm going to control my body through an eating disorder. So part of what we're talking about here is this whole business of being so afraid to let them be stressed, to be offended, to actually think about an issue and have to work through somebody's disagreement with them, and think about, wow, they really aren't thinking the same thing I am. Why do I think the way I do? And if we don't allow them to do that, they don't develop critical thinking skills that then is going to be so vital for them as they move into the workplace and they become our future leaders.
And I think that those really are very elementary lessons that we want to teach our children in kindergarten and first grade, is that, you're very angry at Johnny who just stole your crayons, but you can't haul off and hit him. When you're angry, this is how you're supposed to respond. There's a separation between, feelings and behavior. And what we're allowing our kids to become is just these, super sensitive feelings machines that they don't know how to respond or act or do anything. It really kind of cripples them. So let's talk about ways that mothers and fathers can allow their kids to struggle. Let's just take social media, for instance, since we're talking about that, because this is a big problem area for a lot of parents with kids, particularly with young girls. There's all of this nonsense going on in social media, a lot of criticism, a lot of hate, a lot of bad words going back and forth. And I do think it's important for parents to actually sit down and see the conversations that are happening on social media. Because a lot of parents are like, my daughter is in 7th grade at a Christian school. She would never send a picture of an emoji of the middle finger being sent to a friend, or she'd never received a naked text from a guy. Well, she would, because this is kind of what's happening. So when there's conflict and pain and hurt that your 12 or 13-year-old is feeling on social media, what are your recommendations for how a mother and a father should help their daughter navigate that ugliness?
Yeah, I think one of the key principles is just because you feel something to be true doesn't mean it's true. And helping kids separate out that whole business of just because you're feeling a certain way, because your feelings can impact the way you behave, and vice versa. The way you think about something can impact how you feel and how you behave. So teaching kids the consequences of what they're doing and helping show them the consequences, that when you behave this way or you feel this way and you do that, this is what's going to happen. And one of the things you have to do is make kids face the consequences. So you're right. You have to be on those sites. You have to be doing a little bit of trolling and looking at what they're doing and getting some of their passwords, especially the younger they are, I would say. And when you see something or somebody tells you of something and you look at something that's like an inappropriate post, you talk to them about the consequences of that. Again, we got to remember kids are impulsive. Their brains are not fully formed. The part of the brain that has to do with judgment and thinking and waiting and having long-term consequences is just not there yet. So it's the parent's job to keep saying, this is what happens when you do this. And when you do this, this is going to be the consequence. And part of the issue here, Meg, is that we've been so good at listening to how badly our kids feel without having to put some consequences on that and actually make them go back and repair some of the things that they've done by apologizing to people, by going back to the school and telling the teacher that they should not have said that. I remember a time in the school that my kids were going to where the teacher said something to my child and it wasn't true. And my child had, kind of argued with the teacher. And, she came home and she told me what happened. I said, well, you know what? That's your teacher. That's between the two of you. I'm not involved. Go back, be respectful to that teacher, talk to her, first apologize for the way you reacted, and then have a conversation with her. And if at that point you need me to come in, okay, I'll come in. But I want you to try to work it out first. And that's a coaching model that we have to do with our kids, where we make them deal with the consequences of their action, coaching them, guiding them, giving them some guardrails about how to do that, but making them go back and deal with people and making repairs. And honestly, this is no different than marital work. Because what happens in marriages is that you hurt each other, you have problems between each other. If you don't make what we call marital repair, your relationship is going to be problematic. And so we have to learn how to do this, not only between the spouses, but also let kids do that with whomever they're dealing with as well.
I'm so grateful that you used that illustration, because from my perspective, it makes a child feel better about themselves. It's empowering, if you will, to say to a child, look, you can do this. You don't need me to come in and scream at your teacher, which is what a lot of parents do, particularly mothers. I see this. Mothers get the hairs on the back of their neck stand up. How dare you accuse my child of that? How dare you say that to my child? They leave the child home, they run in, and I've even seen mothers go on social media and start railing against a child on behalf of their child. And what it does is it makes the child, the mother's daughter who's just sitting at home watching her mother freak out over what a child did to her. It makes her feel impotent and it makes her feel small. And so it's so much better to stand behind the child, push them and say, you go deal with that. You figure this out because you can. And I think a lot of times our message, I see this just more with mothers and with fathers, going back to what you originally said, fathers have an easier time watching their children struggle on many different levels than mothers do. So I really appreciate that, because we have to start doing that. We have to start telling our children, you can, not you need me to. And I see this with 20-something-year-old men where the mothers are still in there. I was at a large conference and a young woman raised her hand and said, what do? I have a 23-year-old son, a 24-year-old daughter who don't want to leave home. And I said, you're not going to like my answer, but here it comes. You don't need them home. And for some reason, they're getting the message that you are doing so much and wanting so much to be the mom and making life easy for them. They believe that you need them here. So, you've sort of got your claws in on them and you're not letting them go. So I said, once you reconcile that you don't need them there, you'll push them out and then they're ready to live as adults. But mothers have this sense so much, I think, that I need to keep parenting my kids and they need me and I need them. And so it gets very, very messy.
Part of what you're talking about is you're undermining the self-mastery that a child needs to develop. This is how a child gets confidence. This is how a child then is able to stand up in the class and give that speech because they've maybe struggled with it. Maybe they did poorly. And one of the things we don't like in our culture, when everybody gets a trophy and everybody gets a medal for participating, is that people don't experience failure. And one of the ways that I learned the most was the time that I messed up and I failed. And then I realized, okay, I can't do it that way again. I got to do it this way. But it was part of what developed the mastery that I needed to do. And so one of the ways that we are really undermining them when we take over and we do for them. But I want to say that one of the reasons I think a lot of times moms do that, and I think this is really important, is because a lot of times we're being triggered by things that are unresolved in our own life. Yeah. Maybe we're remembering a time in our teen years when we really struggled with something, or maybe we're struggling with our weight. We see our child struggling with weight, or maybe we were bullied and we see somebody bullying and we never really learned how to work that out. And so we're trying to sort of work through our problems through our kids, and we have to be very careful not to do that. If we need help working through our issues and we find that we're being triggered a lot by our kids, we should go get help so that we're not repeating those patterns with our kids and we're not undermining their need to struggle, to deal with stress and then master that stress so they can go out and be confident young adults.
Those issues are hard to recognize, I think, as a parent when you're in them because, I'm a parent of a millennial, you're a parent of millennials, and so everybody's mad at us because we didn't let our children develop self-mastery and we made life too easy. And basically, I think a lot of parents did it out of our own brokenness, our own need, because we wanted to, in other words, the reason we don't let kids master something is because of our need and our brokenness coming out in that relationship. We only have a few minutes left, but a couple of things I want to touch on. Divorced parents. I often hear a divorced mother, a divorced father say, we're doing the best we can. We're going through this divorce and we're putting our kids' needs first. And yet and then in their next breath, I hear a mother or a father just rail against their ex-wife or ex-husband. And this is terribly painful for children. Can you just talk to divorced parents about what they need to do to genuinely put their kids first and help them?
The very best thing is that you can try to resolve whatever issues you weren't able to resolve when you were married. Now, I know that sounds like, then why would they be divorced, right? Except that people do get down this divorce path and they end up being divorced. But if you just say, okay, that's it. Now I don't have to work on that relationship at all anymore because I'm away from that person. You're not away from them when you have children. So your issues of anger, your issues of offense, your issues of betrayal, trust, whatever that is, if you don't work through that, even after the divorce, it's going to continue to be acted out through your kids. And we see this all the time where, the kid becomes sort of the way that you can get back at the other person, or you try to have a better relationship with your child to earn their love and their affection because you're so mad at your partner who didn't give you that love and affection. And one of the worst things that I've seen, and I don't know how often you've seen this, Meg, but it's this thing called parent alienation syndrome, in which a parent turns their child against that ex-spouse and talks poorly about them and actually tells them, well, if he loved you, he wouldn't be late to pick you up. Or if he really cared about you, then he would be at your recital, and starts to give that negative path because it's really their own anger that's being funneled through that child. So when I work with a lot of parents of divorce, and I've worked with a lot, I can say you might think that you can put aside your differences differences and put the child first. But every time that you are having an intense emotion in that relationship, look and see where that's going with the child, because most of the time it's going through that child, and you're continuing to fight through them and trying to get back at each other. So divorced parents have to be so careful to separate that stuff out, and I think make peace with their ex in some way and resolve those issues. You have to do what was really difficult in the marriage, and that is you have to look at that other person, find the positives, focus on the positives, and then forgive and let things go. And if you could have done that in the marriage, you probably would have not been divorced. So I know what I'm asking. I'm asking people to do things, but this is Matthew 5:44. This is blessing those who curse you at times, loving and, loving your enemies sometimes, praying for somebody who might have despitefully used you. This is right out of Scripture where Jesus says, look, it's easy to love the lovely. It's not easy to love the people that hurt you and do things to you. And you might have to, every time you take that child for a visitation, say, okay, this is going to be another opportunity for me to forgive this person and to pray for him and to turn him over to God and not continually judge him and say negative things in front of my child about him, and to look at my own heart. Because what Jesus was saying to us, when you continually judge him, Jesus says you're a hypocrite, because what are the things that are going on in your heart that you have not let go of, and you have not forgiven, and you have not, dealt with and given them over to me rather than hanging on to them. And we know that hanging on to anger and unforgiveness leads to bitterness. And if you're bitter around your children, they're going to feel it, because they feel those negative emotions. They feel the silent treatment. They feel the tension and the high conflict that's going on in that relationship. And high conflict is one of the factors that impacts a child's well-being and their ability to have a good quality of life. So again, this is hard. This is why I tell parents, get somebody to work with if you're struggling with this, but you have to start focusing on the positives, maybe why you married that person and had children with that person to begin with, and find those moments and talk about those moments with your kid.
It's one of the hardest things a person can do in life, I think, because having a child is like living with your heart outside your chest. And now you're trying to talk to that child about a person with whom you've had deep, deep, deep pain and conflict. And it's just extremely hard. 2 of your best pieces of advice for fathers and 2 of your best pieces of advice for mothers. What are those?
Okay, so for fathers, here's a really great piece of research. The research says that the quality of the relationship that the father has with the mother is the key to better parenting. So isn't that interesting?
Yes.
The more a husband cherishes his wife, has a good quality relationship with his spouse, the better that parenting is going to be. And then the second piece of advice would be for fathers to stay very involved with their kids, because they're so vital. They have to be there no matter what we're hearing. And when a father is involved, that translates to better academics, to cognitive and behavioral and general health and well-being in all areas of a child's life. It's a risk factor. It's a preventative risk factor for a lot of other problems that children can have. In terms of moms, what I would say is to a mom, be confident in the woman you are first, because if you don't understand who you are, if you are struggling with your own identity and you don't understand your own sense of security, first in Christ and then in your own relationship with God, if you don't get that and have a secure base from which to operate on, you're going to bring a lot of those insecurities into those relationships with your kids. So when you're secure, then you're really able to meet their needs first. And then the second thing I would say is just stay very attuned to the emotional needs of your children. Again, not rescuing them, but at least being attuned so that you know how to direct them in their emotions, how to regulate those emotions, how to be able to use those emotions, then to act in ways that are responsible and helpful.
That is beautifully said. That is very, very well said. And it's very interesting because the number one piece of advice you have for dads is so different. Dads, work on your marriages. Moms, feel secure in yourself. And then for dads, stay engaged, stay there, show up, be there. And I just love that. My guest has been Dr. Linda Mintle. You are a wealth of of information, Linda. I think at 10 points during our conversation, we could have gone off in that direction and done a whole hour's worth of show on just that topic. You have so much fabulous information. Thank you so much for being my guest.
It was a great pleasure. Thanks, Meg.
All right, parents, let's get social. I want to hear from you and interact with you. You can connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at MegMeekerMD. Or if you have a question, send it to me. Ask Meg at megmeekermd.com. Today, I have a question from Sarah, who writes, Dear Dr. Meg, I'm considering homeschooling, and I'm curious what your views are on it. I know parents who homeschool, whose kids are great and well-rounded, and I know there's often a stigma attached with homeschooling kids. What are some tips for homeschooling parents to avoid overprotecting and over-sheltering our children and to prepare them socially for the real world? Well, first of all, Sarah, I want to tell you that I have become a fan of homeschooling. And here's why. Many years ago, when I was raising my kids, not many parents were homeschooling. And the truth of the matter is, the curricula weren't very strong, and there really was a stigma attached to homeschooling. Kids were isolated, they stayed at home, they didn't interact socially with a lot of kids their age, and I think that a lot of that has changed. Here are some of the reasons I love homeschooling. First of all, the children that I have seen who have been homeschooled are very self-confident, self-assured kids. I'm impressed with how these young kids look at adults in the eye and interact with them in a very healthy way. They don't treat adults as their peers. They have learned to engage and converse with adults on a child-to-adult level, and that's very, very healthy for them. So these kids, in my experience, tend to be very self-confident. They tend to get along with their peers better, their siblings better, and their parents better. I believe that parents were meant to be far more involved in the day-to-day schooling, if you will, of their children, not necessarily formal schooling, but schooling of all kinds, doing the laundry, doing chores around the house, how to live life. And the truth is, the modern American parent spends too little time with their kids. I also know that homeschooling, if it's done well, can be a great advantage for kids because it's like having a private tutor. Here are some of the downsides to homeschooling. There is a stigma attached to some homeschooling communities, not all communities, but that is not a reason to not homeschool. Second, you really need to make a strong effort to make sure that your son or daughter is well socialized. So you're going to have to work hard to find athletic groups or chess groups or plays, drama groups, dance teams, someplace where your child can interact in a very healthy social environment with other kids. That's very, very important. The other downside can be that if you're a parent who doesn't have the temperament for homeschooling, or you're teaching a child who doesn't have the temperament for homeschooling, it can be disastrous. So just make sure that you and your child have the right temperament for homeschooling. And in my opinion, it can be a great start to life for many, many kids. Parents, I love answering your questions, so please keep sending them in to me. You can email me your parenting questions to askmeg@megmeekermd.com. Again, that's askmeg@megmeekermd.com. I want to thank my guest, Dr. Linda Mintle. What a wonderful conversation we had. I tell you, we could have talked with her for a couple of more hours. She has so many wonderful insights. Now let's recap my points to ponder. First, embrace the different communication styles of your partner. Second, allow your partner room to parent well. In other words, sometimes you need to get out of the way. And third, be intentional about praising the other parent. And remember, until next time, parents, great kids are raised, not born.
Hey, this is Bobby, producer of Meg Meeker's Parenting Great Kids podcast. We hope you've enjoyed listening to episode 30, Helping Your Spouse Be a Better Parent. And thanks to you, Dr. Meg's Parenting Revolution has grown to over 500,000 downloads. You can like Dr. Meeker on Facebook and follow her on Twitter and Instagram at MegMeekerMD. Just as a reminder, go to MegMeekerMD.com and sign up for her newsletter for giveaway opportunities and updates. And don't forget to share the podcast, write us a review, and click subscribe so you won't miss an episode.